Hello, everyone. Welcome into another episode of Bull Breakdowns here on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel. My name is Alex. As always, we're here to talk about the most recent Chargers game, which was a 32-12 whooping by the Houston Texans in the wild card round, which will end the Chargers' 2024 campaign. So here we are at the end of the season. I'll start with this. I think the playoffs end up being a microcosm of what a team's issues are during the regular season. Kind of a one-game sample size of pretty much all of the sore spots and flaws that this team, not just this team, but all playoff teams that have been eliminated over the history of time. What do they do really good and what do they do really bad? And I think you saw particularly the poor side of that today. If I told ChatGPT before the game to tell me, hey, give me the 4 or 5 reasons the Chargers lose, maybe it would tell me Quentin Johnston over 5. It would tell me the interior offensive line probably can't be trusted. It would tell me, no run game, so on and so forth. And the one thing you wouldn't probably tell me is the quality of game Herbert had, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I do think yesterday was representative of a lot of the fatal flaws they had from the regular season that carried into this game. And I think while they finished the season well, the win against the Broncos, obviously a quality win that no one can take away from them. The win and the production against the Patriots and the Raiders was a little bit fugazi, I think, in the grand scheme of things, in terms of what they need to do going forward here. So Quentin Johnston goes from having 186 yards last week to 0 for 5 this week. Obviously not optimal, but look, outside of Quentin Johnston, no wide receiver other than Ladd had over 16 yards. Is that correct? Like, do my eyes deceive me in that regard? Like, you aren't going to win playoff games that way as well. So that is a huge issue to discuss in terms of how they construct the team for next year. They need more high-end pass catchers. And I even felt this way watching Will Dissly yesterday as an example. They bring in Will Dissly on this contract, but they really brought in Will Dissly to be a blocker, right? They wanted him to own the C gap and all these things, and Will Dissly does all that stuff incredibly well. Will Dissly should not be your tight end 1, right? I think he has been miscast in that role as a result of some of the things they went through, and I think that goes back to the offseason process in which they bet on taking a chance on Hayden Hurst, for example, and then Hayden Hurst gets injured, hasn't fit into the offense, was inactive yesterday. So, I think they kind of wanted him to be more of that, receiver type. Obviously, that didn't work out. So then Will Dissly has had to pull a lot of double duty throughout the season, both as a blocker, as a receiver. And I think you can tell, obviously, some of the drops yesterday, he's not the most natural guy, 25 yards down the field. Hey, Dissly, go get this, right? We've seen those drops throughout the season. That's not necessarily something new. And I think as an example of, yes, Dissly should still make those plays anyway, but the offense, due to its limitations, is miscasting him in a role he should not be in, right? As an example. Even Quentin Johnston, who I think, yes, we want to have higher expectations for, but Quentin Johnston has very much shown he is a wide receiver 4 supplementary guy, right? If you're going into a playoff game with him and DJ Chark as your 2 outside receivers, 2025 DJ Chark in particular, not 2019, it's going to go like it did yesterday, for lack of a better way to phrase it. And I think Greg Roman, yes, absolutely deserves some blame with what the game plan yesterday, with throwing short of the sticks on so many key 3rd and 4th downs. I didn't understand a lot of the play designs, like that 4th and 2 incompletion to Quentin Johnston, which clearly kind of was designed short of the sticks, and Herbert said that, hey, like that was supposed to be the first read on the play, and they throw it right to Stingley's side of the field. Like I didn't get some of the designs in that way, but again, like kind of like how much offensive usage Disley has had to have. That's another example, I think, of they have taken this offensive roster as far as they can take it, right? And look, it's an accomplishment, right? You get to 11-6, you get to a playoff game, but clearly, I think from an offensive identity standpoint, you can only go so far with the pieces they have, with the lack of a consistent run game, with the lack of an interior, with the pass catching targets they have outside of Ladd. And so that's something that the Chargers will have to take a hard look in the mirror at going forward in terms of how they want to build this team. And yes, they have the cap space and they have the draft picks to do it. That part of it is not a concern. And then I think defensively, right, like you also have to look at, yes, they got the 4 turnovers yesterday, but what is the future of this defense, right? Jesse Minter will obviously be back next year. That's, he hasn't gotten any coaching interviews. So what does that look like in terms of what do you want on the edge, right? Do you want more speed there? Because right now it's Khalil Mack, who is getting older, and Joey Bosa, who after his injury in, week 1, week 2 this year, hasn't looked the same as a pass rusher as we have come to expect from healthy Joey Bosa, primarily because he hasn't been healthy the whole year. He has a $36 million cap hit next year. What do you want to do, right? And then you have a lot of the 1-year rental guys that they'll have to make decisions on, which I'll touch upon once we get into the questions. But do you want to run Bradley Bozeman back? Do you want to run Christian Fulton back? What do you do with Dobbins? Yeah, I think that one is one that they should bring back, but I think they'll have a lot of those decisions to make. You'll probably have to pay Poona Ford to be able to keep him. You can keep going through those 1-year guys, but both defensively and offensively, they have some structure and turnover that's going to change going forward in terms of how they construct the roster. And I think particularly after the Texans game yesterday, both defensively and offensively, the story of the game is, yes, they have a lot of limitations that I think showed in terms of how they want to address this offseason and how they have to address this roster to getting to Ravens level, to Chiefs level, so on and so forth. It has been 8 minutes, and I have not talked about Justin Herbert. So let's get into that now. It was a bad Justin Herbert game. There's no way around it. I will read a stat from Sheil Kapadia of Twitter, of The Ringer, but of Twitter. He posted this. Out of 214 quarterback performances in the playoffs over the last 10 seasons, that Justin Herbert game ranks 213th in EPA per pass play. Only Brian Hoyer's game for the Texans in a 30-0 loss to the Chiefs in the 2015 playoffs ranked lower. And look, I think Herbert, particularly in the first half yesterday, I think you saw a quarterback that was a little bit both over-aggressive and kind of anxious once the Texans got some momentum going in that game. That interception that he threw, across the field, Quentin Johnston is, kind of like near, 5-10 yard line, and the Texans picked that one off. I looked back on that throw, and I'm sure I'd have the same reaction if I watched the All-22 this morning. But just such an un-Justin Herbert-like play to make in that situation. And then, I think it was a little bit after that, he had the shot play to McConkey, which could have been 6, right, in the back of the end zone. He ends up kind of way overshooting that one. And so I think, again, particularly as the Texans got some life in that game, as the Texans got a little bit more confident once they held the Chargers to the 2 field goals after the first drive, I think that's when Herbert started spinning out of control a little bit. And then look, like, the interceptions in the second half, outside of the Disley one, which bounced off his hands, those were backbreaking. And really, Herbert admitted himself post-game, he put the team in jeopardy. He, all the things that he kind of said, he let the team down. But that really opened up the game and opened a hole for the Chargers that, considering the weaknesses of the offense that we talked about, they were unlikely to climb out of. And even when they did get some positive momentum off of that big lad touchdown, they allow a 2-point return on a special teams play where Dicker's batting the ball down, and then the Texans return it. So they get a 4-point playoff touchdown effectively, which, say what you will about the Chargers, they will show you something you've never seen before in a playoff game. So say what you will about them, but they are an entertaining bunch in that regard. But yeah, going back to the Herbert performance, look, Justin Herbert makes $52.5 million. I'm not saying that as someone who's jealous of his money, but he is paid to be one of those top guys. And the Chargers have built, their engine, their cap space, everything around him being an elite guy that we talk about, along the lines of Burrow, along the lines of Mahomes, Josh Allen, so on and so forth, Lamar Jackson, right? And the last 6 quarters of Justin Herbert playoff football have not been great. I still have all the faith in Justin Herbert going forward. Look, it takes some guys longer to figure out their, playoff experiences than others. You have Peyton Manning not winning a Super Bowl till he was in his 30s, right? Not saying Justin Herbert is Peyton Manning, but just that we've seen a record of, for some guys, it just takes longer than it does others. But for all of the offensive limitations on this roster, they did not lose strictly because of Justin Herbert yesterday. But he was a big loss contributor. I would say out of all the, weaknesses to talk about, he did put the team in a pretty big hole with some of those turnovers. So, like I said, all confidence in Herbert going into, year 6 of kind of this experiment. But I do absolutely believe that, like, the Herbert critics were right yesterday, right? Like, I'm not going to give credit to Emmanuel Acho and people like that, but I would see, hey, if you didn't watch a Herbert game all season and you watched yesterday, like, I would get why someone would say, I'm not sure, like, if he's a guy, right? And I know that's very sports talk radio-y, right? Like, I'm just, callers calling into sports talk radio to debate top 5 quarterbacks and, like, all this stuff and who's better than who. That's not really what I'm trying to get into. But, yesterday was a disappointing game for Herbert. And I think indisputably a performance below his standard, and one that I expect him to recover from. I do not think it'll be the last Justin Herbert playoff game. And I do think Justin Herbert will win down the road. But I think yesterday was a tough pill to swallow. And, I get why other fan bases, franchises are not as sold on Justin Herbert as we are. And that's something that we're just kind of going to have to live with, I think. And for better or worse, until Herbert wins a playoff game, like, I do think that will be the conversation around him and other quarterbacks such as Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, like, whomever it is. Their fates are also decided by, hey, did you win a playoff game or not? Right? Did you put up or shut up? So on and so forth. And I think that will kind of be the reaction to a lot of Herbert's regular season accolades right now, and regular season, stats and all that. It's all good, but can you, focus up and make the plays you need to make in the playoffs? Now, again, Herbert is absolutely not the sole blame, guy after yesterday, but he is absolutely part of why the team lost, even if not the sole reason, which I think is a hard pill to swallow, certainly for us Chargers fans. But as I said, so confident that he is the guy going forward. Let's get into some questions. I think we've talked about this Chargers game for long enough, but I want to talk a little bit about the future and where we kind of go after this. So Michael Morgan says, talk me off the ledge. We have a franchise QB, left tackle, right tackle, and wide receiver, but we realistically need 10 to 12 new starters and badly need depth to even come close to an upper echelon roster. Tell us your vision, maybe a 3-year project, maybe a 1, just how you would best approach this roster. I think the one thing that stands out after yesterday is pass catchers, right? Like, and we've said this the whole season. That's not anything new, but I think this offense did what it could do this year, again, with the limitations around it. If you have one of those game-breaking tight ends, a game-breaking wide receiver, not even necessarily a game-breaking wide receiver. I know people talk about T. Higgins, but I just think you need more competent guys who can win their matchups outside, and guys who, are more classically trained tight end, prospects that have a lot of potential. So I think pass catchers is the biggest thing in terms of like, how does this become an upper echelon roster? You look around the league, whether you're talking about a team like the Eagles, a team like the Lions, those are the teams that have, really explosive weapons that can go off every play. And the Chargers, it was more, hey, like Herbert's trying to make something happen here, but there's not a lot of bombs to go off outside of, the occasional big lad play. So I think that is really the one thing that needs to be addressed this season. And because of the cap problems last year, they weren't able to properly address, like, hey, how do we kind of fully reboot this pass catching offense? You can't go into next season with Quentin Johnston as your like X receiver, right? Like that I think should be pretty clear at this point. I think he could be a supplementary guy, but like the amount that they relied on him this season in those key moments, like I don't think he's ever developing into that pretty clearly. I think you will see some, ups and downs from him, but at the end of the day, I think it's kind of, he is what he is at this point. And look, they had DJ Chark as their X receiver in the playoffs. You're ultimately not going to win a ton of games like that, obviously with the Palmer injury. I don't know if Palmer really changes the macro for them either, but, again, compared to a lot of the teams in the AFC and the NFC, outside of Ladd, this is a bottom 5 receiver group. And so that's the first thing. I think when you look at a lot of the other things around it, outside of that, I do think it is more supplementary. Like, yes, you might have to go out and spend on the offensive line. You might have to go out and figure out what you want to do in the edge room, like I said. But this team is dying for more consistent, easy answers on offense. And it does really feel like every target other than a Ladd target is kind of pulling teeth to like pick up yards. And so to me, that is really the first way you look at. I think as far as, yes, they'll have to nail drafts and get starters throughout the seasons. But I think as far as what is the like main thing they need to going forward, is offensive firepower. Absolutely. And they just never at any point this season had the requisite guys there to be able to compete with Baltimore, to be able to compete with the Bills, to be able to compete with, the Chiefs or whoever it was, just because of their ability to put up points and yards on the board. I do not think they are as far away from being an upper echelon roster as everyone feels after yesterday. I mean, absolutely, it stung. But this is a team that I think can be built up pretty quickly off of the base that they've already rebuilt this year. I think it's just a matter of doing things to really increase some of their offensive explosiveness. But right now, I understand it's not what you want to hear after today. But again, I don't think this team is as far away as yesterday demonstrated based on what they'll be able to do this offseason. And ultimately, just what they'll be able to do going forward. How bad was the interior O-line this year, actually? This question comes from Steven, who's Steven7. How bad was the interior offensive line this year, actually? Is it really a huge need this offseason? Look, the interior offensive line was bad. I think they have tried to kind of fill in the gaps here and there. Obviously, Pipkins was inactive yesterday. They put Salyer in. Salyer, looked pretty disorganized yesterday. I do not think Bozeman is the center to hold this down. That really is what this comes down to. I do not think it has been the best Zion Johnson season either, but I think relatively speaking, Zion has had a better second half of the season, maybe than he's given credit for. I really think it is a question of the right guard and the center spots. Considering the Pipkins contract decision, they can save some money by cutting him this offseason. And then what do you want to do with Bozeman? Or do you, go pursue Ryan Kelly or, other centers in free agency to try to get an upgrade over that? I do think that the statistics and, past the statistics, just what this offense was from down to down in the run game, from down to down taking pass rush reps, from Will Anderson, from, all these guys dealing with stunts was such an issue all year that I think is, yes, a communication issue, but also a talent issue, right? I do think they would not be dealing with so many of the stunt issues that they dealt with the whole year, if not for a talent upgrade ultimately at the center and the right guard spots. Obviously, I think they're going to give Zion another year to kind of figure his stuff out. But yes, the interior offensive line is a problem. I just saw across the top of my screen here on Twitter notifications that Mike Vrabel is the Patriots head coach. Shocker. No one saw that coming. Anyway, at C Thurlow 13, who are some realistic, good, modern OC candidates after Roman leaves? I expect after next year. Will we ever see a top 5 pass offense under Harbaugh? Look, I think that Greg Roman is obviously a coordinator who is kind of limited by, in part, his own ideology, but obviously if he is not able to have an elite ground game, he's not someone who's going to build a lot of the, deep play action shots, a lot of the, things that we see with other coordinators around the league, right? And look, Greg Roman, I think, did his best with what the run game currently was this season, but J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards behind, a bottom 5 interior offensive line ultimately isn't going to go much of anywhere, right? And I think a lot of the Chargers' issues outside of that, in terms of, the lack of pass catchers and the things we talk about, it's all interconnected. So I think Roman absolutely deserves some of the blame for a lot of the situational stuff that we've seen throughout the season. But I always thought, dating back to the offseason last year, that there were going to be some issues that could not be corrected this year without the requisite talent upgrades. So, no, I think everybody knows that I am not the biggest Roman fan, but he's going to get another year, and I wouldn't be shocked if he got another year after that. As far as offensive coordinator upgrades, I think it's hard to tell right now, like, who's going to be available as an assistant a year or 2 years down the road. I have no idea. So it's hard for me to answer that part of the question. But I think for better or worse, they're stuck with Roman, and you just kind of have to hope the offensive upgrades that they get are enough in addition to, some more Herbert improvement in playoff games that it ends up evening itself out. At Serafino1010, I'm worried how this loss and all the social media bashing will affect Herbert in the future, hoping he bounces back and doesn't lose faith in himself. The one thing you can say is very positive after that Herbert game is he will not check his social media. He will go fishing in Oregon. That is not a concern. I do not think he will read or listen to a single podcast or tweet or TV show on FS1 or ESPN or whatever it is. He doesn't give a shit about any of that. And so I think for him, he's disappointed in himself, but a lot of the stuff that will come his way via social media and the media, he cannot care less about. So that's the answer to that question. He'll be back. He'll reassess the mental. It'll be fine. At John Ryan Jr., why did Justin not run even once? Baffling against the Texans, who had given up a lot of QB runs this season, especially with no one other than Ladd who could get open. I think that's more of a game plan issue than it was like a Herbert issue. They didn't do many designed runs. And, yes, you could say that that's a Roman issue. But again, the limitations are this offense was not set up to do a ton of quarterback runs. And, I think next year, if you upgrade the offensive line, then you can do some more design stuff. But really, a lot of the plays this season, Herbert had 306 rushing yards this year. A lot of the plays this season in which Herbert was kind of at his best were runner were sort of those impromptu off-script plays. I do think there is an argument that Herbert needs to get better at that, for sure, in terms of the improvisation in his game and keeping plays alive in the pocket. But I don't know if I say, if there were like 2 more designed runs in that game, then they would have broken up a big play. I think with how the Texans defense was playing them yesterday, I don't, particularly given that Herbert, while mobile, is not like, Lamar Jackson or, certainly even Josh Allen kind of level speed in the open field. I don't know if that really changes the game yesterday. I think there is an argument, again, that yes, he should try to extend plays more. But as far as like designed runs and taking off yesterday, I don't really know if there was a window to do that they didn't capitalize on. I just think it didn't really exist for this team. Michael Lazarus 217. Why did JK run 4 times on the first drive and only 5 times the rest of the game? Also, we did kind of talk about the Herbert thing. Why is Herbert so against taking off to run? I think yesterday there was a little bit of anxiousness, like I said, in Herbert's game in terms of trying to, get the shots. And obviously, look, when they end up down 2 possessions, like I don't know if there was a whole lot of room kind of for the run game at that point, which is why, they ultimately didn't run the ball and got away from it. Look, they were getting holes in the Texans' run defense that they didn't get the rest of the game on the first drive. Like, that's really the answer. They got 4 runs for 16 yards with Dobbins on the first drive, like I said, I think earlier. And the rest of the game, they got basically, I think it was like 14 carries for 34 yards. Simply put, run blocking not good enough, and the holes weren't opening up. And so if you can't get that run game, like we said, then that's going to decrease your ability to reasonably take play action shots. It's going to decrease your ability to, even do some designed quarterback runs if you wanted to do that. I think a lot of Greg Roman's offense does come off of a successful run game. And when we've seen the Chargers have a successful run game this year, we've seen them at their most lethal. And when we see them gain 2 yards, 3 yards a carry, we've seen them be at their worst, for lack of a better term. So I really think that kind of is what it is. I think the ability to do the more creative QB designed runs, I think the ability to take the more creative, shots and trick plays and stuff, that kind of only happens in the Greg Roman offense when you do have good run game performances off of Dobbins and Edwards and all those backs in the backfield, and they just weren't blocked for properly after the first drive. Like there's not a whole lot for me to say other than that than upgrade the interior offensive line. I don't know. Ross Johnson, why am I numb to this feeling? Honestly, I mean, this loss definitely hurts, but I think it coming off of, the rebuild year in particular, not the way you want to go out, but I think compared to other Chargers losses, this one isn't too terrible. I mean, as a kid, whenever Rivers lost in the playoffs, I was just devastated the entire day, and people would make fun of me at school. But yeah, I think for me, the Jacksonville game was worse than this one in terms of the blowback and figuring out what they needed to do, and then they didn't make the GM and head coaching changes then that they should have made after the Jacksonville game. So the rest of that offseason was kind of numbing in a way. So why am I numb to this feeling? I don't know the answer to the question. I think we as Chargers fans have been through a lot of pain. So that's all I can say. Chris Solomon, what do we need in the draft exactly? I think this is a good tight end draft. Like I said, I think they need to really think about that. Defensive interior, even if you resign Poona Ford, I think they'll have decisions to make there. Obviously, do you want to bring Te'Air Tart back? He's a free agent as well. And then I think the key thing that they will need going into the draft that people don't talk as much about, obviously everybody talks about tight end, wide receiver, edge. I mean, again, like I said, Khalil Mack is a free agent. Joey Bosa, the $36 million cap hit. Like, they're going to need to find a solution there, whether it is kind of a half measure and you re-sign Mack and you let go of Bosa, or it is a full measure and you fully restock and replenish the edge room. Like, they got to figure out what they're doing there. And I do think there are some edge prospects in the early rounds of the draft that are worth like taking a chance on. Obviously Tuli will be in the picture still. I think Bud Dupree is under contract, but like I was left with the impression after that Texans game in particular, it's like they need to get faster and be able to finish plays. Because like if you're not getting a ton of pressure, like you need to have some speed when you do get the pressures, right? And I think that was really the challenge of yesterday, which again, like that Stroud play where he fumbled and then got the ball back and then made the completion, right? I just think a faster pass rush is able to, shut that play down compared to kind of what the Chargers have, regardless of what the secondary did on that play. I can only imagine what the O-line would have looked like this year without Alt. This comes from TB. Keep beefing up both lines. The game yesterday proved that games in the playoffs are won and lost in the trenches. Yeah, I think that's true. I think it certainly proved that this team, for as well as they have rebuilt the trenches, still has some work to do in terms of getting to where they need to go in the interior offensive line, as well as, Joe Alt coming into another year, like he'll obviously be better than he was this year. Like, I know he didn't have the best game yesterday, but it takes rookie tackles, years to like figure some stuff out. And I think we've seen what Joe Alton can do, and there's no doubts about that going forward. I do think the trenches part, defensively is about the edge room, like I said, and figuring out what you want to do there, as well as figuring out what you want to do in the defensive interior room. I think we all agree kind of on bringing Puna back, but I think the depth there is also an issue. I don't think they have a lot of defensive interior or edge guys that are behind the main starters that they really trust to make impacts there. I think Morgan Fox has kind of revealed himself to not necessarily be a scheme fit at this point. Too many games kind of where he's gone pretty invisible. So I don't know. I think games are won and lost in the trenches. Absolutely. And they'll make the requisite changes I think they need to make there. But at the same time, they need pass catchers, man. Like they need pass catchers. If they go into this next season thinking they can run it back with this, QJ Palmer, Chark, thing, like as their primary X receivers, they're going to get what they deserve, next season in the playoffs. Right? So, I don't expect that to be the case. They will make moves for their wide receiver and tight end moves. But again, it is a limitation they are playing with. I think that'll do it for me today, guys. Thank you to everybody that has watched Bowl Breakdowns throughout the year. Very successful 2024 season on the channel. I know I appreciate it. Stephen and Tyler appreciate it as well, as in terms of what you've given us, Katzen, and everybody associated with the GAC quartet or crew that we have here. So I appreciate all of you guys, what you've given me throughout this season, whether it's replying to a tweet I made on a press conference, or it's clicking on an article or watching a video. I really appreciate all of what you guys have been able to do for me. I hope, I don't think I'm the best at making the content or anything like that, but I hope I've been able to make some good stuff that you guys have liked too. And I will figure out what the next episode of Bolt Breakdowns is as we go into the off season, and fire up your mock draft simulators, fire up your free agency, questions, and we'll get into that at a certain point down the road. But obviously, I think everybody needs a little bit of a break after what, the whole ride that we had this season, including how it ended. So I will see you guys when I see you guys next. And as always, bolt up, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching. Peace.